The gate came down like a verdict, steel teeth biting the asphalt with a clatter that made children go silent and birds explode from the pines. Sirens wailed somewhere beyond the roller coasters, a hard blue light stuttering over cotton candy carts and slumped balloons. Michael B. Jordan stood beneath the archway of the Tri-County Fun Park with his day pass crumpled in his fist, hearing the clack of the turnstiles and the echo of one sentence that hit like a slap. Not today. Not for you. Rain was on the air, the metallic breath before a storm. Popcorn smelled burnt. Carousels slowed. Over the loudspeaker, a cheerful jingle tried to drown the tide rising in him. It didn't. He could taste rust, like a penny on his tongue, and he realized two things at once. 1. This chaos wasn't just weather. 2. The moment the internet loved most, that sharp gasp of truth, was seconds away. But to understand how it came to this, how a quiet man with ink on his fingers and a library card in his wallet ended up facing a fence like a prison gate, you have to go back 3 months, to a morning that smelled like cut grass and church coffee, when he hammered the first little brass hinge into a cedar box he'd built with his own hands. He was a librarian first, long before the cameras knew his face. In Pine Hollow, North Carolina, the library's air always held hints of lemon oil and old paper, a breath of summer rain even in winter. Michael opened at 8, flicked the lights, checked the drop slot, lined up a stack of kids' books like soldiers with bright helmets. When the door chime tinkled, he called out, "Mornin', ma'am," and meant it. He had a steady voice, and the kind of smile that didn't overstay. His hands bore tiny paper cuts that burned under sanitizer. He believed, in quiet ways, the credo he'd copied into a notebook years ago: doing right when nobody's watching is the only kind that sticks. The little library started as an act of faith. He salvaged cedar boards from a fallen fence, planed them smooth, stained them the color of sweet tea. He cut a pitched roof and shingled it with leftover asphalt squares. Inside, he placed a note in tidy letters: "Take a book, leave a book." He mounted the box by his front yard with 2 lag bolts and a post hole that smelled like wet clay. Children on bikes touched the glass window with reverent fingers. Ms. Darla down the street left a dog-eared copy of Charlotte's Web, annotated in pencil by her grandmother. By dusk, Michael had restocked twice and felt a warmth in his chest like a small fire someone finally remembered to feed. The first letter came folded like a paper knife. "Dear Citizen," it began, and citizen felt less like a compliment than a muzzle. "Code violation. Unpermitted structure. Fine. $250 per day until removed." It was signed in blue ink by a man whose last name sounded like concrete. He read it twice, hand steady, then measured the box again as if measurements could talk sense into power. He went to City Hall with photographs, a stack of signatures, and the kind of hope you protect in a coat pocket. The hallways smelled of wax and dust. A clerk in a pressed blouse took his papers without looking up. "Someone will reach out," she said, eyes on a screen. He waited in a metal chair that complained under him. No one reached out. They reached down. The second notice doubled the fine and threatened a lien. To protect the city's interest. He thought of interest as the opposite of care, numbers that grew like mold. He wrote a letter that began, "Dear Sir, this library is for children and neighbors." He quoted the city's own ordinance allowing small decorative structures under 4 feet, and included a photo of his box standing 3 feet 10 inches, like a kid trying to meet a height requirement. He hit print. He hit send. He waited. The only reply was silence that sounded like laughter behind a door. Neighbors started avoiding him, the strange courage of a whisper in a slow town. "You poking the bear, Mike?" said a man who used to borrow his post-hole digger. "Best not." Someone else said the word troublemaker, soft, like maybe it could be mistaken for librarian, if you were kind. He kept stocking the little library. He kept a log with straight lines. He kept his temper like a fragile heirloom. 2 weeks later, Pine Hollow hosted a community day at Tri-County Fun Park, 20 minutes down the highway where the air smelled like fryer grease and rain baked onto metal. He almost skipped it. Paperwork had a way of multiplying in his bag. But he'd promised Ms. Darla's grandkids he'd try the wooden coaster that groaned like an old ship. He wore a navy ball cap and a faded tee with "Readers Gonna Read" on the chest, and he queued behind families with sticky fingers and squeak-soled sandals. The security guard at the gate was big in the way of a wall and had a jaw like a padlock. His name tag read C. Boyd. Boyd's uniform was a shade too tight and smelled of cologne that fought the August heat and lost. When Michael stepped forward, Boyd's eyes did a quick inventory, slowing not on the face he might recognize, but on the skin he could not ignore. The day pass lay under the scanner like a passport. The turnstile clicked. Boyd put a palm out flat. "Hold up." Michael kept his voice easy. "Something wrong with the pass, sir?" "Something wrong with the day," Boyd said. His eyes slid past Michael to the families behind him, gauging appetite, calculating audience. "Park's at capacity." "It wasn't a second ago," Michael said, because the turnstile had eaten a teenager whole just now, burping approval. He smiled, tried to de-escalate. "I can wait a minute." Boyd's lips thinned. He leaned close enough that Michael could count the threads on his collar. One sentence came out coded in contempt and a lazy drawl that made the vowels sag. "This place ain't for you people. Not today." The words landed heavy, old Hay dressed in a new uniform. Michael felt heat crawl up his neck, a slow red rising. The families behind him hushed. A child dropped a plush tiger that hit the ground with a soft sigh. Michael met Boyd's stare and breathed in the smell of waffle cones and spilled soda and a rot that wasn't from food. He said, evenly, "Sir, you don't want to do that." Boyd smirked. He murmured something uglier, an old slur knife thin, and angling his body, bumped the panic of his words into Michael's ribs with the pressure of authority that had grown too used to winning. Somewhere, a phone camera woke. Michael stepped back. He could have raised his name like a shield. He didn't. He stepped aside, letting the parents pass. A mother touched his elbow and whispered, "I'm so sorry," and hurried her kids through the gate as if compassion could make change but not pay for parking. His hands were steady because he made them be. He pulled his cap brim low, rolled his shoulders once, and took out his phone not to record Boyd but to write a note. "Don't fight the man, fight the system." Water makes its way. That night, Pine Hollow's humidity pressed the stars low. Michael sat on his porch with the cedar box glowing softly under the porch light. He heard the creek in the gully behind his house, water slipping around stones like it knew secrets. He reread the second notice, and every muscle in his face wanted to fold. He thought of kids learning the pleasure of clean paper and a good sentence. He thought of a guard with a badge misused like a club. He tapped into his silence, that deep well that had seen him through auditions, critics, losses no one clapped for. He had no taste for public brawls. But he knew how to build, how to document, how to let truth walk without shouting. In the morning, he went to the library early and pulled public records like thread from a tangled drawer. He found a pattern in the code enforcement logs: fines for lemonade stands, cites for porch swings, warnings for wheelchair ramps too close to sidewalks. He sketched a map. He highlighted addresses. A name popped up like a stain. Deputy Director Charles Boyd had once been a supervisor in security at Tri-County Fun Park. Same man. Same jaw. He didn't post. He called. He left a voicemail at City Hall. "This is Michael Jordan from Pine Hollow Library. I'd like to discuss the Free Little Library Ordinance and some possible conflicts of interest. I prefer to resolve this quietly. Please return my call. He hung up and wrote the summary in his notebook. Doing right, even when nobody's watching. He added, let them decide if they want eyes. No one called back. The next twist arrived not by phone, but by foot. A teenager named Luis, who often shelled paperbacks for community service hours, came in red-faced and breathless, waving his phone like a flare. Mr. J, he gasped. They posted it. Posted what? My sister's friend recorded what the gay dude told you, Luis said, eyes wide, rage hot and young. She put it on her story. It's blowing up. Michael felt the earth tilt. He didn't chase phones. He didn't beg for attention. He did not court storms. But storms came all the same. He took the phone and watched himself, small in a frame that made him an archetype, man, hat, patience, and heard Boyd's slow contempt sharpened by a caption. Park guard tells him not for you people today. Comments flooded. That's Michael B. Jordan, y'all. Others. Doesn't matter if he's famous. That's wrong anywhere. A sheriff's deputy emoji. A popcorn string. The algorithm had tasted blood. By lunch, a reporter called the library desk. We'd love a quote. He declined and suggested they cover the story of fines on little libraries instead. Bigger than me, he said. City Hall woke. The clerk who had never looked up called him by full name as if he were a complaint. Mr. Jordan, there's a process. Yes, ma'am, he said. The process seems to punish kindness and protect revenue. That's not fair, she said, and then, strangely honest, sighed. But it isn't wrong. He made a public records request. He noticed the fine clock ticking loud as a broken metronome. He pictured kids lifting the cedar door and finding nothing because he'd let fear gut it. He stocked the box again. He added rain covers to the spines. He moved forward like water. The second twist arrived with thunderheads. Tri-County issued a statement. We do not condone discriminatory behavior. The employee has been placed on leave. Comments divided. Some posted ride selfies proclaiming loyalty. Others demanded more. Michael said nothing publicly. Privately, he printed accident reports from the park's last 5 years and found that the gate where Boyd stood had jammed repeatedly. Each incident was logged by a man who had later been promoted to Deputy Director of Code Enforcement. Connections braided like rope. Pressure built. An envelope arrived by courier, urgent stamped hard enough to bruise. It announced a hearing 2 days hence to authorize a lien and other remedies. He called an attorney he knew from a school fundraiser, Camille, who said, bring everything. And Michael, if you're sitting on something bigger, now is the time. He thought of Boyd, of lines blurring between the gate and City Hall. I'm documenting, he said. I'm not weaponizing. Yet. The hearing took place in a beige room with a flag and a clock that lied by 2 minutes. The city attorney read from a packet as if reading absolved him. A code officer slid photos of Michael's cedar box across the table like evidence of a crime. Michael listened, smelling toner and anxiety. When it was his turn, he spoke quietly about kids who visit his yard at dusk. He showed measurements. He saved the last page for last. The connection between Charles Boyd at the park and Charles Boyd at Code Enforcement. A Venn diagram with 1 name and 2 jobs. Camille asked, Sir, is it standard practice for someone with current employment ties to a private venue to adjudicate public code cases? The city attorney blustered. The chairwoman tapped her pen. We'll take this under advisement, she said, which sounded like wait your turn in a line designed to never move. Outside, the sky was a bruise cured to purple. Thunder staggered across the hills. Michael dialed a number. Ms. Rivera? He said. I think it's time. Ms. Rivera ran a small channel that punched above its weight. She met him at the library after hours with a camera and a notepad full of questions. She didn't ask about movies. She asked about books and boys who stand on tiptoe to see themselves tall. She filmed the cedar box under the porch light humming with moths. When he told her about the gate, she said, "You don't have to show that part if you don't want it to be the headline." "I want the headline to be kids with books," he said, "but I won't cut out the knife that sliced me." They shot B-roll at Tri-County. The gate stood quiet. The turnstile still. A maintenance truck idled. Ms. Rivera filmed the archway. Michael spoke into her mic like he was recording a letter to someone not born yet. "It's not about one guard," he said. "It's about a habit. Power that forgets people. A city that finds kindness because it's easier than fixing rot." Back home, he organized the footage. He wrote a thread that began with measurements and ended with the ordinance. He added, "I'm not mad at a man. I'm mad at a system that trains men to fail." He scheduled the video to premiere Saturday at noon, right before the board reconvened. The final push came like a dare. Friday afternoon, a city truck pulled up. Two men in safety vests stepped out with a post puller and a saw. The taller one consulted a clipboard. "Order to remove unlawful structure," he said. He took 3 steps toward the cedar box and paused. He heard the shout of children, the sound of neighbors gathering. Michael walked down the steps and stood between them and the box. "Gentlemen," he said, "you can cut cedar. You can't cut what it's holding." "Sir, don't make this ugly," the tall one said. Michael smelled rain and opened the scheduled post, his thumb hovering over publish. The thumbnail showed the cedar box lit like a candle. Under it, the title Ms. Rivera had chosen, "Little Library, Big Fines. Who profits?" He said softly, "We'll let the people decide." He pressed his thumb down. Rain began, fat drops exploding on the pavement, drumming on the cedar roof like fingers on a table. Phones lit up around the cul-de-sac like fireflies startled into honesty. Somewhere in town, the board chair's phone buzzed. Somewhere else, Boyd watched a bar graph spike. Michael kept his eyes on the cedar door, not because he feared the saw, but because he feared apathy more. Thunder rolled close enough to rattle the spoons in his kitchen, and the real storm was just beginning. As the rain poured harder that night, the kind that soaked through roof shingles and whispered against windows like a warning, Michael B. Jordan stood by his cedar box with a single umbrella and the quiet resolve of a man who'd seen storms before and knew when to let them speak. The video had gone live only hours earlier, but already it was roaring across every platform like fire through dry fields. Views multiplied faster than the rain fell, and comments turned from sympathy to outrage, from curiosity to investigation. The thumbnail, the little wooden library glowing beneath the streetlight, had struck a nerve deeper than any headline could measure. By dawn, news vans lined the narrow street of Pine Hollow. Their floodlights cut through the drizzle as reporters shouted questions through the fence. Michael's phone vibrated endlessly. Journalists, lawyers, activists, even strangers offering to pay his fines. But he kept the device face down on the counter, letting the world spin while he brewed coffee that smelled like patience. The city board meeting scheduled for noon began in chaos. 100 residents filled the hall that usually held 12. Signs lifted above heads. "Let kids read, end code corruption, Boyd must go." At the front, the chairwoman tried to gavel order, but each strike echoed hollow, drowned by chants. Michael entered quietly, rain still glistening on his jacket, Camille beside him with folders stacked like ammunition. He didn't need to raise his voice. The crowd did it for him. Boyd sat near the end of the table, his uniform pressed, jaw clenched, pretending to study his papers while sweat gathered at his temple. Cameras turned his way, lenses clicking like judgment. When the chairwoman finally restored order, her voice trembled. Mr. Jordan," she said. "You may present your statement." He nodded, stood, and opened a single page. "I didn't come here to humiliate anyone," he began, his voice steady and low. "I came because I believe public service means serving the public, not punishing it. You find a box of books. You find a message that children deserve free stories. You allowed a man with 2 jobs, one in security, one in enforcement, to decide who belongs at a gate and who belongs in a neighborhood. That's not just policy failure. That's moral failure." A murmur rippled through the crowd. He turned slightly toward Boyd, not accusing, just acknowledging. "You told me this place wasn't for people like me. Maybe you were right. Because if Pine Hollow keeps choosing greed and pride over kindness and education, then maybe it doesn't deserve the people trying to make it better." Boyd's eyes flickered with something between shame and anger. Camille stepped forward with printed screenshots, financial records, and an email trail showing code enforcement budgets padded by public-private partnerships with Tri-County Fun Park. Each violation, she said sharply, generated revenues shared with the very department Mr. Boyd oversees. The more tickets issued, the higher the discretionary bonuses. Gasps spread like sparks. The chairwoman looked pale. "Is this verified?" Camille nodded. "Every line item." The room erupted. Reporters called out questions. One of Boyd's colleagues stood up, denying, shouting, but the noise was unstoppable. Outside, thunder rolled again, followed by chants that carried through the rain. "Let them read. Let them read." Boyd pushed his chair back, his composure cracking. "You think this changes anything?" he muttered, leaning toward Michael. "They'll find another me tomorrow." Michael met his eyes calmly. "Then tomorrow I'll be here too." Cameras caught that moment. 2 men divided by more than a table, one defending the system that fed him, the other defending the people it starved. When the board recessed, Boyd stormed out into the hall where rain still leaked through the old ceiling tiles. Reporters followed him like a tide. Michael stayed seated, staring at the empty chair across from him. He whispered, "Doing right, even when no one's watching," and exhaled. But now everyone was watching. By nightfall, national outlets picked up the story. Hashtags formed and multiplied. Hashtag books not fines. Hashtag Jordan versus Boyd. Hashtag free little library. Donations poured in through a fundraiser created by Louise's sister, enough to pay every fine and build 50 more boxes across North Carolina. But Michael didn't touch the money. He told them, "We'll use it for something bigger. For literacy programs in towns that think silence is policy." The following morning, he woke to find a police cruiser idling outside his house. A different officer stepped out, hat in hand. "Mr. Jordan," he said, "we're just here for your safety. There've been threats." Michael thanked him, though part of him mourned how predictable hate could be. He brewed 2 coffees and handed one to the officer through the rain. "Storms pass," he said. "Always do." Later that week, Ms. Rivera uploaded part 2 of her video. The hearing, the documents, the chant outside. It opened with Michael's quote, "You can cut cedar, but you can't cut what it's holding," and ended with a slow pan of the neighborhood now crowded with new little libraries painted by children. The footage went viral faster than the first. Viewers shared it not as a scandal, but as a sermon on persistence. Celebrities tweeted, politicians called, and Pine Hollow, once invisible, became a symbol of quiet resistance. The city council called an emergency session. Boyd didn't attend. He'd been suspended pending investigation. Camille's evidence triggered an audit revealing years of misuse. The mayor appeared on live television, sweat beading on his lip, promising reform. Michael watched it all from the porch, the cedar box beside him shining after a fresh coat of varnish. He didn't smile. He'd seen too many promises wilt after applause. Still, when a car pulled up and the first to step out was Boyd himself. No uniform now, just jeans and a weary face. Michael rose slowly. The air between them was thick with things unsaid. Boyd held his cap in both hands. "You got a minute?" Michael nodded. They walked to the edge of the yard where rain had carved thin rivulets through the clay. Boyd's voice cracked like dry wood. "I lost my job," he said. "Guess that's justice. Guess that's consequence." Michael replied softly. "Justice would be learning from it." Boyd's jaw flexed. "I was raised to believe people should stay in their lane. My old man said rules keep order." "Rules keep order," Michael said, "but empathy keeps peace." Boyd nodded slowly, staring at the box as if seeing it for the first time. "Kids love that thing," he said. "Saw it on the news. Didn't know it was yours when I said what I said. Doesn't matter if it's mine," Michael said. "You'd have said it to someone else eventually. And maybe they wouldn't have had a camera." Boyd winced. "I came to say I'm sorry. Doesn't fix much, but it's true." Michael studied him for a long moment, the rain dripping from the brim of his hat. "You can start fixing by helping," he said. "We're building 10 more next week for the county. Could use a pair of hands that knows how to hold a hammer instead of a badge." Boyd looked surprised, then uncertain, then nodded once. "I can do that." "Good," Michael said. "Bring nails." That weekend, half the town showed up with lumber and paint. What started as a protest turned into a festival. Kids painted hearts and quotes on each box. The smell of sawdust and barbecue mixed with laughter. Even the local paper, once silent, ran a headline that read, "Rebuilding Trust, one book at a time." Boyd worked quietly beside Michael, sweat darkening his shirt. At one point he paused and said, "You know, cameras eat this up." Michael shrugged. "Let them. Maybe someone else needs to see what change looks like." A few days later, the state attorney general announced formal charges against multiple city officials for financial misconduct. News crews returned, expecting anger or triumph, but they found only a man wiping varnish on a cedar door while children ran by with books in their arms. "Mr. Jordan," one reporter asked, "what do you think of the verdict?" He glanced at the camera. "The verdict doesn't matter as much as what we do after. You can punish greed, but you can't legislate kindness. You've got to show it every day." The clip aired everywhere, and the line became a mantra printed on posters and shirts. Yet, beneath all the attention, he stayed the same, the librarian who still opened at 8 and said, "Mornin', ma'am," like the world hadn't cracked open. Weeks passed. The fines were dropped. The ordinance was rewritten to exempt community libraries. The town commissioned Michael to lead an initiative building 50 across the state. One morning, as he locked the library door, Camille called. "You're trending again." She laughed. "Someone made a montage. Your speech, the boxes, the apology. It's beautiful." He chuckled. "As long as they spelled empathy right." But later that evening, scrolling through the comments, he found one that stopped him. A woman from another town, writing, "Our HOA just find a neighbor for a free pantry. Because of you, we're fighting it." He felt a lump in his throat. That was the ripple he'd hoped for, a small circle widening until the whole pond moved. Months later, Pine Hollow held its first literacy fair. Rows of little libraries stood like sentinels, painted bright blues and yellows. A brass band played under the pavilion. Boyd manned the grill, laughing awkwardly but honestly, his sleeves rolled up. Ms. Darla read stories to kids while Louise handed out bookmarks printed with Michael's quote. Reporters came again, but this time they filmed smiles instead of confrontation. When they asked Michael for closing words, he looked around, the children trading books, the adults talking across differences, the sound of rain starting gently again as if heaven approved, and said, Every story starts with someone brave enough to open the first page. Sometimes that page is pain. Sometimes it's resistance. But if you keep reading, it always ends in hope. Applause swelled, rain mingled with it, and for the first time in months, Pine Hollow felt whole. Later, after the crowd left and the park lights flickered out, Michael walked back to his porch. He touched the cedar box, now filled with books and letters from strangers. On the inside of the door, he carved a new line beneath the old one, "Doing right when everyone's watching, do it anyway." He smiled at the irony that it had taken millions of eyes to remind people of something so simple. In the distance, the faint hum of the amusement park reached his ears. Tri-County had reopened under new management, with a diversity program and free entry days for local kids. He'd been invited to the reopening, and after some hesitation, he went. As he walked through the gates, no lines, no stairs, just music and laughter, he found himself standing again before the carousel. The new security guard, a young woman with kind eyes, recognized him. "Mr. Jordan," she said, "on behalf of the staff, we're glad you came." He nodded, looking at the turning horses, their paint glistening under lights. Boyd approached from the other side, now head of community outreach, wearing a simple polo instead of a badge. "Never thought I'd see you here again," he said. "Never thought I'd want to be," Michael replied. Boyd gestured toward the ride. "Free passes for the kids' literacy group. Maybe you should do the first spin." Michael laughed softly. "You first. I'll read the sign." They both smiled, and as children climbed onto painted horses, the carousel began to turn, creaking like an old song rediscovered. In that moment, under the swirl of lights and distant thunderclouds, the past felt lighter, forgiven but not forgotten. Cameras clicked again, but this time the story wasn't about anger. It was about what follows when empathy wins. Weeks later, Pine Hollow's city website added a new line beneath its logo, "Where kindness is policy." The mayor sent Michael a certificate of civic leadership. He tucked it into a drawer, preferring the sight of kids reaching for books to the sound of speeches. When asked by a national host what kept him from quitting after humiliation and fines, he said, "Because quiet change lasts longer than loud outrage. You can shout for a day, or you can build something that whispers for generations." The host smiled. "And what's next for you?" "More libraries," he said. "Maybe one at Tri-County's entrance." The audience laughed, but months later it happened. The park funded a new cedar box right under the archway where everything had begun. On opening day, kids lined up to leave books, not tickets. Boyd gave a short speech. "When I met Michael Jordan," he said, "I saw a man standing in the rain. I didn't know I was the one who needed cleansing." The crowd cheered, but Michael only smiled quietly, stepping aside as a girl placed the first book, a copy of Charlotte's Web, inside the box. "This place is for everyone," the girl read aloud from a plaque below the window, words carved into the wood by Michael himself. "Always was. Always will be." That night, when the lights dimmed and the park emptied, he sat on a bench near the carousel, breathing in the smell of oil and cotton candy. The air was heavy but calm. He thought of the long months between insult and healing, how every storm had washed something false away. He realized the little library had never been about books. It had been about belonging. About the courage to build something gentle in a world that rewards noise. He stood, brushed rain from his shoulders, and walked out through the gate that once denied him. The guard at the post, the same young woman, nodded respectfully. "Good night, sir." "Good night," he said, smiling. The road back to Pine Hollow shimmered with puddles reflecting streetlights like constellations. As he drove, he passed the creek still whispering beside his home. The water glowed silver under the moon, alive and unbroken. He parked, stepped out, and touched the cedar box one last time before heading inside. Inside the glass, a child's note waited. "Thank you, Mr. Jordan. Because of you, I want to be a librarian too." His chest tightened, tears mixing with rain. He looked up at the sky, now clearing, stars reappearing through ragged clouds. "Doing right," he murmured, "even when nobody's watching, or when the whole world is. That's the only story worth telling." The camera of the night caught him there, a silhouette against the glow of the porch light, the cedar box beside him standing proud. In the silence, only the soft rustle of pages could be heard as the wind flipped them gently, one by one, toward tomorrow. If this story taught you that kindness isn't weakness, and that doing right can still rewrite the ending, hit that subscribe button. Because stories like this deserve to be remembered.